Hi, good evening. This is Casey Robinson, the principal at HB Woodlawn. It looks like we've got a number of people who have joined us tonight, which is great. We're going to give people another couple minutes to join us, and then we'll start our program. So we'll just give people another minute or two. Okay, so typically, or our plan for this evening, I don't know how many of you are new to Microsoft Teams live events, but we were hoping that Jen Atkin, who is one of our PAC co-chairs, would be able to introduce this event. She was the one who coordinated the Google form and collected all of the questions that parents and students shared over the last 2 weeks. So thank you to everyone who put questions in that form. Graham and Kate and I spent some time this week reviewing all of those questions, and we, with the help of Jen Atkin, sort of categorized them into several topics that we'll go through tonight. In terms of logistics, this is our first Microsoft Teams live event, and everyone is muted, and I can't really see all of you. I think everyone can only see me. We'll get better at this as we go along. But we do have the live event Q&A that people can put questions into. We won't necessarily answer all of those questions in the chat, but if we have time at the end of the evening, we will try to answer as many of those as we can. We are just about 2.5 weeks from the start of school, and I know that many of you understand this. We still don't have all the answers, but as parents ourselves, we know that any information we can give right now is valuable and useful to our community, both to our students and our parents. So the topics that we're going to talk about tonight, the first one is broad, which is virtual learning, and I'm just going to try to answer sort of broadly questions about the plan when we start school on September 8th. And then I'm going to go into a section on technology, and all of these are based off of the questions that students and parents submitted over the last couple weeks. Then Graham is going to go from there into talking about sort of some more nuts and bolts about scheduling, and a broader topic called miscellaneous that just hits on a number of different things. And then Kate is going to talk a little bit about the transitions and our plans for orientations and the transition for our new students to HB Woodlawn and for our seniors. And then she's also going to talk a little bit about college advising, although we'll be sharing out more information with our senior parents about that later on in the next 2 weeks. And then finally, time permitting, I'll spend some time talking about what the plan is for when we return in person. We will certainly be having more meetings before that happens. So we'll do that sort of on a as needed basis or time basis at the end. So just to get started, you know, I want to just say that Kate and Graham and I feel extremely fortunate that we are embarking on this year with our students and our families at HB Woodlawn. We feel incredibly supported by our families, and that goes a long way, and I know that our teachers do as well. We are going into somewhat unknown territory, and as lots and lots of people have said over the last few months, flexibility is going to be the key. But that being said, I do want to share the information that we have at this time. So to start, I sent out a schedule last Friday that is basically a draft schedule, but we hope that that schedule, which sort of says that Mondays are a asynchronous day, and then Tuesday through Friday, we have 80-minute classes. 4 of those will meet each day, along with either TA or iBlock or town meeting in the afternoon. During each one of those 80-minute blocks, there will be at least 50 minutes of synchronous instruction happening. And Graham's going to talk a little bit more about the difference between synchronous and asynchronous. And we're certainly happy to take questions about that. One of the things that we as a staff are working on and will continue over the next week is creating what we're going to call a learning contract. That will be something that all of our students will review and go through with their TAs during the first couple of days of school. And this contract is basically partly lessons learned from the spring about things that we know will help us to do a better job with this kind of distance learning. So we're going to have one contract for our students, and then we will also have a document that we'll be sharing with parents. It's not necessarily a contract for you, but sort of just what you can expect from teachers and what we hope we can expect from you as parents. And in that learning contract will be things like being on time, that we will be taking attendance, that we expect students to be in class right at the start of class, that we hope all students will have their camera on, especially at the beginning of the year, so that teachers and students can get to know each other. We know there might be some exceptions to that, but we hope that the general rule of thumb will be that students will be in a workspace that is their learning space for the day with their camera on, ready to go. We got some questions about attendance. We will be taking attendance in the same way that we have in the past. So you will be able to check Parent View and see if your student was there or not there. And, you know, we don't know exactly how this works, but we are expecting that a student stays in their class for the full 50 minutes that they need to be there, or whatever the amount of time that the teacher is directing. So, and that if your student can't be in class, they're sick or they have an appointment or something else, you would communicate with Vanessa, who's our attendance secretary, just as you have in the past. And if you're new to HB, we'll be sending out some specific directions about that in the coming weeks. We also got some questions about curriculum changes because in many classes there was not new material introduced in the spring, particularly in math and in world languages. There has been some compacting of the curriculum so that teachers will be sort of teaching those core power standards from math, from world language in the first quarter to make sure students are up to speed, and then sort of they've had to take some things out of like the full year in order to include that material. And people have asked, can we share what is being, you know, moved out of the curriculum? And we'd be happy to do that. I'll make sure that math teachers in particular are able to share that with families as needed. We also got some questions about what will assessment and tests look like in the virtual environment. These are great questions. And we are going to be talking as a community about what academic integrity looks like when we're doing online learning. But I'm also, you know, we as an administrative staff are really encouraging our teachers to think about assessment in different ways. We probably won't be just pulling out the Unit 6 test. We'll be asking students to demonstrate their learning and their knowledge in different ways. that we make sure is authentically their own work. So for example, in a math class, rather than doing 15 problems, students might be asked to make a video where they explain their thinking. How did they solve this problem step by step? So that the teacher can know that they themselves understand how to solve that problem. So we will be trying to communicate as best we can. Teachers will be communicating about what assessment looks like. We got a lot of questions, which I completely understand. As a parent, my child is desperate for socialization and in-person activities as well. But right now, APS is giving us absolutely no wiggle room on having in-person activities. So we had lots of teachers who said, hey, can I meet at a park and kids can come there to have a study session? And as of right now, as a school, we can't say yes to that. That doesn't mean that you can't work together with other families to have social activities for your kids that are safe. But right now, we, as a part of APS, cannot have in-person meetings. We also got a number of questions about how we'll be using TA and iBlock in town meeting. So we intend to get back to our town meeting, and it'll be happening every other week. We'll be using Teams. It won't be this kind of Teams live event. We want to make sure that we are doing our town meeting in a way where all the kids can see each other, and we'll have our chairs and our usual process for town meeting. TA is going to be a really critical part of our schedule this year. We will be taking attendance in our high school TAs for at least one of the TA sessions a week. The other TA session is more likely for high school to be maybe more individual meetings with students, or the TA might say, I'm going to meet with all of my juniors today, or I'm going to meet with all of my sophomores today. So TA will have some flexibility, but we are going to be, that's where we're going to be sort of talking about how students are doing, their social emotional needs, and trying to build those connections that we rely on so heavily at HB. Another question was about the iBlock time, and teachers are eager for that iBlock time as a time where students can come and get help, or a teacher can run a small group session to help and follow up on something. So some students will be invited to come to iBlock with a teacher. Other students might choose, like, hey, so-and-so, I need to meet up with you. So they would be able to schedule a time to come and virtually meet up with that teacher during iBlock. So that iBlock will be used for a lot of different things. Not every student will have something to do at every iBlock, but we hope that it's a time where students can either continue to work asynchronously, or they might get together with their friends. So we'll be spending the first 2 days of school, so September 8th and September 9th, are going to be entirely about community building and norms and structures. So we won't be starting classes until Thursday. Students will be engaged in activities all day on Tuesday and Wednesday. We'll be having our first meeting will be with TA. The second part will be an all-school assembly. Then we'll go into some more logistics, like how to sign up for different teams and different activities. And then we're going to be doing some all-school activities, bingo and scavenger hunts and whatnot, just to make sure that kids are connecting with people other than just their friends. So those first days of school are going to be really important in terms of setting expectations and making students feel welcome, and we hope that they feel excited to be back at school. We did get some questions about the asynchronous day being on Monday. That was entirely an APS decision and not one that we had any control over. So it does make for 4 days in a row of school. and a 3-day weekend, which some people think is a good thing, other people think is not a good thing. We'll see how this goes. And one of the things we're going to be talking about those first 2 days is how to help students structure that asynchronous day on Monday. Some teachers will be having office hours on that day. It will be a day mostly for planning for teachers, but there will be other sort of interventions and opportunities for students as needed to get help that day. But in general, students should expect that they would have about 30 minutes of material per class to work on that day. And then the last question, sort of, or second to last, is with this block schedule, where it's an 80-minute period. This is different for our teachers. We have been on a 45 to 50-minute period for a long time, if not the entire history of HB Woodlawn. So a lot of what we've been working on this August with staff is how do you make sure that that time is being used effectively, especially in a virtual environment. And so making sure that there's lots of different activities happening over the course of that 80-minute period. So students might all come together to start class. The teacher might give a brief mini lesson, then ask students to go into breakout rooms to talk about something. They might come back, have a whole group discussion. Then the teacher might say, okay, you can go off and watch this 10-minute video, and then we'll come back. So making sure that that adjustment to 80 minutes, it's not just 80 minutes of a teacher on the screen talking at students. In terms of other things around building community, we'll have those first 2 days of school. We also, when teachers come back on Monday, we're going to be talking about how do we make virtual clubs happen? How do we make sure that we have social time for students, especially for our new students who don't necessarily know people at HB Woodlawn? So we'll be posting information about that on grade level Canvas sites and on our website, trying to make sure that students have access. I've already had teachers saying, hey, I want to reserve Friday at lunch for the TAB meeting, or I want to make sure that MGA is meeting at this time. So that will also be happening. One other logistical thing about virtual learning is that we'll have a lot of materials that we need students and families to come and pick up. So that'll include, sort of packets and maybe some basic science equipment, art supplies, textbooks, a lot of different things. And we are generally planning that pickup of materials would happen the week of September 14th. That will give us time to work out schedule changes and all the things that happen during that first week, so that you're not picking up materials for a class that your student then decides to drop. So you can sort of have in your mind that on September 14th, that week will be a time to come and pick up materials. That sort of transitions into a question about technology. Our rising 6th and 9th graders are due to get new technology. And we hope that will be before school starts, but there's a good chance it might not be until that week of September 8th. Again, we'll set up a time for students to come and pick up their new iPad or their new laptop. Until that time, students will just continue to use the device that they had from 5th grade or from 8th grade. So again, we'll be keeping rising 6th and rising 9th grade families apprised of the timeline on when that technology will be available. One of the biggest pieces of feedback that we got from families, both through this Google form and in the spring, was a need for greater consistency in the way that teachers post assignments and share information, especially on Canvas. So this summer we had a project where we came together and came up with requirements for all teachers on their Canvas page. Things that they must have as a part of their Canvas page. And one of the priorities when we come back next week is that each grade level team is going to meet and come up with consistent practices for how to post material. And so there will inevitably be some differences in the way that courses are run, and the kinds of assignments you have in math are just different than the kind of assignments that you have in geography or chemistry. So there will be differences, but the teachers are really working hard as teams to come up with some more consistency in the way that Canvas is used at each grade level. And what that will really speak to is the core classes at each grade level. So 6th grade through 10th grade, those are the groups that are going to be working on this. At 11th and 12th grade, students start having a lot of different classes, and it's probably good practice for them to also be able to navigate different expectations in different classes. But 6th through 10th grade, those teachers are working on those sort of consistent practices in the use of Canvas and in the use of Teams. So that's one of the main things that'll be happening next week. We got a lot of questions about the logistics, like, will we be having to post a link for every class, and kids going back and forth and whatnot. So we are really committing to using Microsoft Teams, and students will be enrolled in a team for each one of their classes. And so that's another one of the things that we'll be doing in the first couple of days, is making sure that every kid is enrolled. So they don't have to go find a link every class period. They'll just go to A Block Geography, and that will be a standing place for them to go at that time. So we'll continue to message to families and also to students about the logistics of doing that. We got some questions about connectivity issues. What happens if your student can't get online? We know that there are going to be days where that happens. We also know that that might happen for a teacher. So we're trying to make sure that teachers have plans ready to go, things posted online in advance, so that if there is a problem, students are still able to get going with their work. We'll again send out really specifics about this, but if your student is genuinely having connectivity issues, you can just email the teacher or email Vanessa. They can email the teacher or Vanessa to let them know that. If we're having those issues regularly, then obviously we would want to be in contact with you to see how we can help out with that. Got some questions about Global Protect. Unfortunately, that is not something we at HB Woodlawn have any control over. Also got some questions about Parent View. Right now, Parent View has very little information in it. As we are working on schedules and figuring out TAs and all of those things, very little is public facing in Parent View right now. All of that will go live over Labor Day weekend, and that's also when students will be able to see their schedules. And Graham's going to talk a little bit more about schedules when we get to that section. Their APS is also rolling out some parent academies. You've probably been getting school talk messages about those, how to use various resources. I think there's going to be some really great information there that you can use. But we will also, be pointing parents to the ones that are most helpful for you as middle school and high school parents. Got some questions about whether we should buy a printer. You should not buy a printer. I know that a lot of people were, printing out documents a lot this spring. I think that was partly because teachers hadn't fully made the shift to online in the virtual learning environment. We are going to be providing some, hard copy materials at the beginning of the year, and for certain students who need that accommodation, we'll be working on that. But you should be able to get through this time without buying a printer. And then the last thing in this section is that synchronous learning, that portion is not going to be recorded necessarily. Just as a class during a typical year would not be recorded. If there's direct instruction from the teacher, they might record that section and post it, but there is not an expectation from us that teachers will be recording all of their synchronous classes. If a student has to miss a class, they can use iBlock, they can use office hours, other times to meet up with the teacher to find out what they missed. So that's sort of an arching overview of where we are. Sorry, an overarching overview. That's an overview of where we are technology-wise. So now, in a minute, Graham is going to take on topic 3 of scheduling, and I'll start looking at some of the questions that are in the live Q&A and starting to answer some of those if it's appropriate in the chat, or we'll pull some of those for answering at the end. So I'm going to turn it over to Graham.
Hey everybody, I'm Graham McBride, one of the assistant principals at HB Woodlawn, and I'm assuming that will happen several hundred times this year where someone, of course, starts talking and they're muted. We did receive a lot of questions, and we're still receiving lots of questions from students and parents about specific classes that kids signed up for and might want to change now that we know the format of the learning that we're going to be doing in the fall. And we anticipate there's going to be lots of requests for schedule changes, just like there usually are in the beginning of any year. More than ever, we strongly encourage students to try the classes that they signed up for. And they signed up for these classes in February, which seems like a very long time ago, but we hired and assigned teachers based on what students chose in February. So we won't be able to accommodate large numbers of students shifting. As things fall into place in the fall, we will have a Google form that students can submit to add or drop a class. And as is usually the case, we would want students to start with their TA in that process. They may know, they may know some background about whether a class would be full or not, and what's going on in that class. In addition, that TA would be able to come to either Casey, Kate, or myself to talk about the likelihood of that shift happening. Many of our high school students have asked about their Career Center classes, and their Career Center classes will continue to meet virtually. The majority of HB Woodlawn students take those Career Center classes during the AM period, so they don't conflict with any of their HB Woodlawn classes, and then they begin their HB Woodlawn classes afterwards. And as of now, all Career Center classes will be meeting, and they will earn their credits that they are hoping to earn through those classes. Many students have asked if they would be able to take more classes, and we are not going to be able to do that in the vast majority of cases due to our class size limits. If a student would like to take fewer than 7 classes in high school, or fewer than 8 in middle school, they can discuss that with their TA, and that could be something that we discuss kind of on a case-by-case basis. Over Labor Day weekend, final student schedules will be available in Student View. That's when it'll kind of open up. All of our rising high school students, 9th through 12th, made schedules through the arena scheduling process in June, and we will be using those schedules. We have had to make a few changes to the schedule, as we always do, but most of the classes that our high school students signed up for during arena scheduling will remain in the same block as they were in arena. We shared via a school talk, we shared our proposed schedule last Friday in an email to all families. We will send additional copies of that schedule in the coming weeks. And the expectation is that students will log on at the beginning of each period, and the schedule, and again, we'll send out again, but that you should have received last week, that at the beginning of each period, we will take attendance, just like we always have. And then there will be instructions from the teacher on how the class will proceed, and that might vary by class, by grade level, etc. iBlock and TA and town meeting are built into the schedule throughout Tuesday through Friday. We got a lot of questions about whether HB Woodlawn students will be learning from HB Woodlawn teachers, and the answer to that is yes. At HB Woodlawn, our synchronous TA time is in the afternoon. The comprehensive high schools, that is a little bit different. It's in the morning there. And on Mondays, there will be a time for individual meetings with TAs as availability allows, office hours for certain classes, club meetings, things like that. Our Mondays, for some students, will be pretty packed with actual online meetings, and for some students, it might be, excuse me, a little bit more free-flowing. I think Casey already we got a lot of questions about whether we could pick which day was the asynchronous day, and we had no control over that. We also received many questions about whether families or HB or who had control over changing groupings for students if and when we return in the hybrid format. And for the most part tonight, we want to avoid talking too much about the hybrid and stay with like what we're going to do as school starts here. But I will just kind of throw out there that we will have limited discretion in the groupings for students. There are going to be some things beyond our control in terms of the Tuesday, Wednesday, or the Thursday or Friday. So please, if and when we get to that point, please bear with us. We talked a little bit about what the kind of schedule for a specific class might look like for 80 minutes. And I wanted to just give a couple of examples of what that might look like. For instance, a student might log in to the beginning of their class, and their teacher might, just if you think about your experiences in face-to-face classrooms over the years, whether you're a parent or whether you're a student, you know what that's like, right? You kind of show up, things, there's a warm-up, these types of things are going to happen online as well. Teachers are going to have, all right, the homework from last class, we're going to be going over that first. You've all turned it in, or most of you have turned it in, right? And so we're going to make sure that everybody is on the same page before we move forward to today's lesson. And that could be the first 5, 10, 15 minutes of a class. There will also, of course, be students being called on, being expected to be on camera and, whether they've raised their hand or not, be able to participate and have a discussion. The synchronous time may not be the first 45 to 50 minutes of the 80-minute block. It may be interspersed throughout the block. And Casey mentioned a couple of these examples earlier. A teacher might have a lecture for 10 minutes and then say, all right, here's the reading that I want you guys to do. And students will be asked to re-enter the class in approximately 10 to 12 minutes. And at this time, we are going to get back together. We're going to start a discussion. Teachers might ask students to break out, and that might be more asynchronous. There might be 3 to 5 breakout rooms within the class, which kind of take on the role of a small group discussion as opposed to a large class discussion. And so I think depending on the subject matter, students might get a little bit more or a little bit less of the synchronous or asynchronous time during the 80-minute class periods. But I also think these are really great things to discuss with their students. How do they learn best? What classes might be challenging for them because of the nature of how they're learning them this fall? And so those were just a couple of the examples I wanted to give. We had lots of questions about our beloved music classes, which will be a challenge to teach and learn in. And I want to all of you parents and students out there, especially you guys who take music classes or are interested in taking music classes, Bill Podolsky, Risa Browder, and Carl Holmquist have spent a great deal of time this summer trying to figure out how to keep the incredibly high level of instruction and performance in their music classes in the fall, even in a virtual format. So those of you who have been a part of our music program for years or who are interested in just starting out, stick with it. We're going to make it work, and there's going to be fits and starts and things that we wish worked a little bit better. But we have faith in those teachers, and we want to keep that community thriving. Also, a lot of questions about how PE would work. And one thing to remember is PE and health are kind of the same class. In other words, the same part of the same credit. The health portion of the class can actually be taught online, just like every other subject. There would be, a similar synchronous, asynchronous, but PE, in terms of kids, it is really, really apparent right now that kids are definitely going to need physical exercise to help their bodies stay healthy and their minds stay healthy. But it's going to look a little different in PE. And it's going to look a little different in 6th grade than it might in 9th or 10th grade. There's going to be a variety of strategies that our PE teachers use in order to keep kids engaged in PE classes. Kids are going to be keeping exercise journals. They're going to ask to be creative about how they do exercise. There's going to be limitations on families as to when and how kids can do exercise based on living situations. So we're definitely going to be accommodating to that. But the goal is we want kids to have healthy minds, healthy bodies. And so our PE teachers will be working really hard to make that work for each and every kid who's taking physical education at HB Woodlawn. We were asked lots of questions about why we switched to 80-minute classes. Casey also covered a little bit of this before. We're going along with APS here and switching to these longer classes that meet 2 times per week. Students will definitely be learning new material during these times. And they'll be transitioning fewer times in these longer blocks the way we're doing it this fall than they would be if we were doing shorter blocks like 7 or 8 times a day. So during these longer blocks, rest assured, I think students will be doing up to 6 or 7 different activities, maybe even more, depending on the class in that 80-minute block. I don't think you're ever going to find a class that's just like 80 minutes of lecture the entire way. So that's a little bit about scheduling. The next group of questions I'm going to try to answer, the category is miscellaneous, because they really didn't fall into any of the categories, but we do think it's important to address them because enough people were interested. Many of you who have already been HB Woodlawn students or parents are familiar with our student services counselors. Elizabeth Otten, our school social worker, Grace Santorelli, our school psychologist, and Siobhan Bowler, who's our substance abuse counselor. They are going to be available to meet individually with students. All TAs and teachers will be aware of the process to sign up for meetings, and they're going to be sharing that information with students during the first week of school. If you're a parent and you want to schedule something for your student, let's start with the TA there. The TA could make an inroad and schedule something to start off with one of our student services counselors. We've got a lot of amazing comments and questions and shows of support from our student and parent community. And a lot of questions about staff and how we're doing. And several parents asked about the challenges of trying to teach from home while having young children at home. And I think, our 3 administrators, we all have we all have kids between the ages of 2 and 9. And so we are all facing challenges right now. And so I think one of the things that we are going to be preaching is flexibility and the benefit of the doubt. I'm hearing from kids who are saying they're anxious about connectivity issues and internet not working and all these things that are real things to worry about. But I think a lot of our teachers are also worried about the same type of thing the other way around. Oh gosh, what if they see, what if my daughter wanders onto the screen? We're all dealing with a lot right now. So I think we're all going to be giving kids the benefit of the doubt. And that's something that any parent could tell their kid right now if they're feeling anxious about, like, what if the internet cuts out? What if, we're all just going to assume if you're not showing up, it's an issue with the internet. That's the first thing we're going to assume. And then you're going to log on when you can. We're not just going to jump to somebody who's going, we operate on trust, and we're going to continue to operate on trust as we continue in this virtual environment. We had a couple questions about substitutes and how that would work. We are working with our regular substitutes to have them on call as needed, and we're also working with teachers to make sure that they have asynchronous options when a substitute's not available, if they're not going to be able to host their class for that period. And so this is not optimal. We don't want kids to be staring into a screen for more than a few hours a day as it is. But one of the things that's been kind of a blessing in disguise in working with our teachers is we've been asked a lot about screen time and how we feel about that. Right, we're on the same page, literally and figuratively. We wish we were in person. But one of the silver linings in all of this, as an educator, and as someone who's been talking about education with colleagues and with parents and with students over the past few months is a lot of our conversations are centering around teaching and learning. What's the best way to teach this? What's the best way to learn this if you're this type of kid or this age, or if you've already had this class? So we are looking for, and in many cases finding, engaging ways. We are innovating each day. We're learning new ways to kind of bring material out into the open and make it available at different times of day and bring it to large groups and small groups. Working with teachers on how to use effective classroom management strategies to address some of the inequities we saw in the spring. You know, students who monopolize conversations, students who didn't engage at all. I think we will be using the separate breakout rooms more regularly and the raised hand feature in Microsoft Teams so that teachers can call on students in different ways. On a completely different note, the HB gym and auditorium are ready for use once once we get back there. We had questions about some of the things that we've done when we've been in person about HB Woodlawn students, especially some of our older students, being proactive helpers. We are definitely looking for ways to have students volunteer to help some of our teachers, especially things like managing the chat in let's say middle school classrooms, other aspects of online learning, kind of organizing files, submitting. We hope to find new ways to connect older and younger students. We are still looking for innovative ways to connect with our Shriver cohort and Shriver community. We tried a bunch of different ways in the spring. Some we found success with and some we failed, and we think we're going to keep going with that in the fall. Lots of questions about school supplies. I don't know if some of you guys have read this from APS. We are going to have a toolkit, and there'll be more information about this soon. Each grade level is going to send out information in the coming days about specific supplies and times to come to pick up textbooks. It's already been mentioned, but we're going to have outdoor textbook pickup depending on grade, on availability in the coming days and weeks. One of the things that we mentioned earlier was our learning contract. And a few of the biggest teacher concerns are attendance and engagement. And by the very nature of the fall being new material and grades attached to it, we do anticipate some more engagement and kids just being excited to for the start of a new grade. These learning contracts in each class are going to look a little bit different, but one of the basic things we really want students and parents to be talking to each other about the first few weeks of school are the idea of being present and what that means. Not just being logged on, but having your face showing, participating in whatever way you're being asked to, being out of bed, hopefully, are all things that teachers are going to be talking about with students over the first few days, so we can come up with some norms for what it means to really be present in class, even though we're all separate. Those first few days and first few weeks are really going to focus on community building. And how we use technology so we can get where we need to go with mastery of content. We're going to be getting to know each other. We're going to be doing icebreakers. We have to reimagine what it means to be a community. So that's going to be the first thing that we're doing, is trying to make sure everybody is kind of on the same page with what we're going to be doing and how we're going to be doing it, and feels comfortable with all these new peers, especially our brand new students to HB Woodlawn. We want to spend the first few days and weeks really getting to know each other and making people as comfortable as they possibly can be with the technology that we're going to be using, and then we'll dive into the academics. A lot of questions about back to school night. We're going to have one. We're still working on the format. We are going to have a way for teachers and parents to connect that evening. We've gotten a lot of great suggestions, and we are definitely going to consider those suggestions because we've never done one like this. If you're a parent and you have not gotten any school talk messages in the last few weeks, we've sent out a few. We have found out that many of our parents have blocked school talk messages, and some have done it so many years ago that they did not know that these messages were blocked. One of the ways that you could find out is by going on Parent View, and there's a setting there that could be changed. If you are not sure, if you're a parent and you're not sure whether you have school talk or not, blocked, you can go log into Parent View and you can find that information there. And if that isn't clear, you can contact Vanessa Picarosi in our main office, who can help you through that transition. Because we are going to be sending out, we have been and will be sending out the vast majority of all school information to all of our families through the School Talk email system. And so that's some miscellaneous and scheduling stuff. If any of the things that I said weren't clear or you had questions, many of you know me, but I'm Graham McBride, so the same email address that many of you already know, but graham.mcbride. And we're going to transition into transitions. And so the next person you're going to see on screen is our other assistant principal, Kate Sesh.
All right, well, we did pretty well to get almost 45 minutes into this without a technical difficulty. So while we figure out Kate's microphone situation, I will talk a little bit about transitions. Now, Kate is really the expert on this, but we've been talking somewhat casually tonight because many of you who are participating have been a part of the HB Woodlawn community for many years. But for those of you who have new students, both our 85 new 6th graders and about 25 new 9th graders, and then a handful of students in other grades. We recognize that it is really hard to join a new school in a virtual environment. We're not promising that this will be easy, but we are definitely going to do as much as we can to support our students who are new. So the week before school starts, I think September 3rd, we are going to have orientations for our rising 6th graders and our rising 9th graders. So we'll be sending something out specifically to those families. Our 6th graders will meet in their TA groups to meet their TAs and have some discussions, start to meet each other. For 6th grade, they are going to be doing a lot of, community activities to get to know one another, to build in social time, to make sure that they can make friends, because they have only probably know a handful of kids that will be going to HB Woodlawn. For our 9th graders, we'll also have an orientation with our core 9th grade teachers on September the 3rd. And then we also have our senior class, which is an amazing group, the class of 2021. Hopefully some of them are on here. I know some of their parents are. And they have lots of ideas and plans for how to welcome new students. So they have been meeting and working on that. And they're going to try to make when students come to pick up materials, as fun and HB as possible. So we are going to try to sort of connect, especially for our new 9th graders, connect them with other 9th graders who've been at HB Woodlawn through middle school, so that they have sort of buddies and people to work with. And again, just that focus on the first 2 days of school will be on that transition time. For our seniors, I know that this is really hard, both for them and for their parents, who've been looking forward to many of the events that would have happened senior year. They've been looking forward to that for a long time. One of the lessons that we learned from the spring is that we have to look for new ways to keep our values and those traditions alive. We can't just try to replicate what we had pre-pandemic. So we will being creative. I just got an email from some seniors today about how they want to do the first assembly, and they're creative people. We will make some good things happen. We also want to assure families that our TAs will be reaching out, if they haven't already, to every senior to make sure that they are supported and getting one-on-one support through the college process. All right. Should I turn back to Kate or keep going? Keep going. Okay. Briefly on college advising, because we will be doing sending that information and having a meeting for our senior parents later in September. Right now, we don't have any more information than you do about whether an SAT will be offered in the fall. I think it's probably highly unlikely unless we are back in a hybrid model. But right now, I think it's not likely that we will be offering an SAT in APS schools. The college advising landscape is different, as the parent of any senior can tell you right now, because many students never had the opportunity to take an SAT or an ACT. That may or may not be the case for our juniors, and whatever the case may be, whether most of the colleges go test optional, we will be working with your students to make sure that they are as prepared as possible for college. The PSAT, there was a decision made today that we will not give the PSAT if we are still in all virtual. And if we are back hybrid by mid-October, we would only be giving it to 11th graders, just because of all the social distancing rules. We wouldn't be able to have test conditions for more than just the 11th graders. In terms of SOLs and other tests, we are just waiting to see what VDOE, which is the Virginia Department of Education, what they say about SOLs for this year. Right now, the plan is still that there would be SOLs for classes that have SOLs. And like I just said, we'll continue to do individual guidance for seniors, and we will share information about AP exams as we get it. And hopefully the world will look a little bit different by May when we have AP exams. So those were just the key points we had under college advising. I did get a number of questions we got a number of questions in the chat, and there were a couple that had a lot of people asking the same thing. So I'm going to answer those real quickly. One is about TA assignments. So yes, we will be, your TA will be in touch with you probably by the end of next week, either by email or a note in the mail, just so that you know who your TA is before school starts. The first place that kids will report to or attend on the first day of school will be their TA. And so it's important that you know who your TA is. There will be a link on your TA Canvas page that will be how you enter your first Teams meeting with your TA. Again, we'll send really specific directions about that the week of August 31st, so all students know how to start their day on September the 8th. I also just wanted to reiterate what Graham said about music classes and about really sticking with the electives that you chose. When I shared some of the questions about music classes with our teachers, they wrote me passionate responses about the importance of music and community in our lives during something like this. And Bill just shared with me a video that he made about all the things that they're going to be doing in chorus this year. Bill and Risa have some really great ideas. And if and when we return in hybrid, we will cross that bridge when we come to it, but band and chorus will not look the same as they would in hybrid. They will probably still sort of be more in the virtual realm. But I do believe that our music families are committed. We're going to keep our concert dates. We'll have music sharing opportunities on each of those nights. So I would just really put a plug in for sticking with excuse me, your art and your music classes. One of the other questions we got from a lot of people was about homework. This will be something that we'll be figuring out as we go, but in general, I think we feel like the asynchronous time during classes is when students will be completing a lot of their assignments, especially at the middle school level. So for sixth graders, you probably wouldn't expect to have a whole lot more homework after 4:20. Now, there might be a little bit of asking people to read, maybe a few math problems, but not a lot. There will be some, large independent projects. We're still thinking about like how do we have our science expo, things like that. So, but we are very aware that students will already have spent a lot of time on their screens and engaged in work. Now that is going to look different in high school. If you are in a AP class, the pace is probably going to be such that there will be, just like there was homework problems that's, excuse me, that you would need to be doing. But we have asked teachers to make sure that it is they're as thoughtful as they can be about the amount of time that students are engaging across all of their classes. So we are really aware of homework, and that's another reason that we've created grade level teams at every grade level, so that even in high school, the teachers are sharing information about how much work is being assigned. All right, so that was sort of, we tried to answer as many of the other questions that were in the chat. I like the way one person put it, if classwork is done at home, does homework even exist anymore? And so we understand that there's, the line is fuzzy there about those. And, please feel free to communicate with me or Kate or Graham about concerns there as the year goes on, so that we can be working with teachers on it as well. All right, so I apologize. The last topic was about returning in person. Like I said, I don't want to spend too much time on this, and I think Graham talked about it as well. Like, we want to be doing the best possible job we can on what we've been tasked with for September 8th. The way that we were able to keep HB Woodlawn students with HB Woodlawn teachers is by having a mix of students, both virtual and hybrid, in classes. So if and when we come back in the hybrid model, we will share a lot more detail about that, but students will be broken up who want to come back to school into hybrid A and hybrid B, but they will also still be getting some synchronous instruction on the other 2 days that they are not at school. And I think that's an advantage, that students would sort of continue on the same schedule. They would just have an opportunity to do some of their work from school as opposed to fully at home. So because of that, I am not as worried about virtual and hybrid kids being in silos away from each other. I think the vast majority of our students selected hybrid. All parents will have an option to revisit their decision if and when we go back in hybrid. And we will be doing our very best to make sure that virtual students, entirely virtual students, are included in all the activities. And I think because we're starting all virtual, that's going to be less of an issue than it would have been if we started some hybrid, some virtual. We did get a lot of questions about how will lunch work and how will we enforce masks and what happens if someone gets COVID. All of those, I think we will have a lot more information about as we get closer to starting in hybrid. So I'm just going to check with my colleagues here, Kate, Graham, Tyler. Is there anything else in the chat that people want to bring up that either of you want to respond to? Okay. So I will, we were hoping to kind of wrap up here by around 8:30. Wow, it is 8:30 on the dot. That's amazing. It is very strange to have a meeting where you can't see any of the people that are attending the meeting. We would welcome feedback from you on how this went. We will be trying to have PAC meetings monthly and the best format for those. I think it might be it might work better to have a regular Teams meeting where we can see everyone's faces for future ones, but we weren't sure how many people would be on for this. The main thing I hope you take away from this is that, you know, we are committed to doing the very best that we can for your children through this process. All of us wish we were all together and doing school in a normal way. This is a lot of work for every one of us who is a working parent, trying to balance our kids' education, and for every teacher trying to balance like the kind of teaching and learning that we love to do, which is being connected with our students and seeing them every day. So please, you know, I've asked all of our teachers to be flexible with students, and we ask that you be flexible with our teachers. But I also, you know, encourage you to reach out to us if you have concerns, both before school and once school starts. We can only get better if we know where there are issues. So we look forward to the best possible start to the school year, and you can look forward to several more emails with more detailed information to come in the next 2 weeks. So onward to September 8th. Thank you all for coming tonight. This will be recorded and posted. We'll send a link out on School Talk because I know there were some other meetings tonight as well. So if you want to spend another hour with us, you can. But if you want to share any of this with your student who wasn't able to be there tonight, feel free to do that. So we'll send that link out tomorrow morning. All right. Thank you all. Enjoy these last few weeks of summer. Thank you, Kate and Graham, for being on and helping with the chat. And thank you very much to Tyler, who's our ITC, who was the behind the scenes person for all of this. And one last thank you to Jen Atkin, who organized all of this and organized all the questions for us and worked her magic behind the scene too. All right, have a great night. Thanks all.